There are 4 levels of autism: mild, hot, fire, and Diablo. Please label yourselves accordingly.
No one go and attack this commenter, but this is a commonly held misconception that needs to be cleared up. The autism spectrum is not a spectrum from no autism to lots of autism. It is not linear. You cannot be mildly autistic. You are either autistic or you are not autistic. There is no in between. There's no mildly autistic. There's no super autistic. You are or you aren't autistic. The spectrum that autism spectrum disorder refers to is a spectrum of symptoms. It is a spectrum of how severe certain symptoms are. Someone could have much more severe sensory issues but less severe social deficits, or vice versa. It is a spectrum of symptoms. Think of the spectrum as a circle and with like little pie charts. Every slice of the pie is a different type of symptom you can have. Some people might have this slice of the pie filled up all the way to the top, but this slice of the pie is only here. If you are autistic, you are on the pie chart. You are on the circle. But the severity of your symptoms may differ, and your symptoms can also differ depending on days. Some days my sensory issues might be more severe. Some days my language deficits might be more severe. Some days my social skills are really not social skilling, and they am way more impacted by my social deficits. However, if you are autistic, you will always be in the circle, and you will always have some combination of all of these symptoms, because these are the diagnostic criteria. You have to have all of these symptoms, but the severity, the intensity, that might vary from autistic person to autistic person. But the spectrum is not linear. You are autistic or you're not. You are not no autism or a lot of autism. You're not just mildly autistic. You're autistic or you're not autistic.
This is exactly why masking kills us. In my unprofessional opinion, I do not believe that the autistic brain is wired to ever get used to something. I call my brain a switchboard. My switchboard has capacity, okay? Anything that drains my switchboard's capacity will always drain my switchboard's capacity. However, now that I'm aware of this, I can count the cost of something. I can acknowledge that is going to be a very stimulating event. I need to be sure that I wear sensory friendly clothing, that I don't, have too much other activities this week. My life isn't easier because I've discovered the trick on how to get my brain used to something. My life is better because I'm now aware of what's going on. I'm now aware that my switchboard is being drained, so I don't get myself in autistic shutdown or burnout so quickly, which is why I always advocate for self-diagnosed autism, so that people can know the cost that they're actually paying to human.
Here I am once again.
So in a previous video, I talked about some new research looking at brain scans of mothers listening to baby cries and how you could actually see different areas of the brain activate to mobilize and help mom sort of get up and go take care of their child. As this commenter points out, though, in autistic infants, the cry pattern is actually different and elicits a different response from the parents. In particular, we have a number of studies over the years showing that autistic infants have a cry that has a higher fundamental frequency. So the overall pitch of an autistic infant's cry is higher than a neurotypical infant. In addition, the space between cry sounds is shorter, so that the cry is high pitch and closer together throughout the experience. In parents, both the subjective and physiological stress response is one of unease, right? So when a parent listens to an autistic infant's cry, they respond more uncomfortably than when listening to a neurotypical cry. In addition, some researchers even studied autistic kids' parents to neurotypical kids' parents to say, do these two groups differ in the response? And the answer was mostly no. Both still feel that unease, when listening to autistic infant cries. And this were cries from other kids, not just their own. So they factored that out as well. The only difference they did see was that parents of autistic infants had learned to sort of bring down their heart rate reflexively better than the parents of neurotypical kids. So there was some effect of possibly exposure to the stress response, but not seemingly enough to understand that they needed to respond differently, that the unease was a reflex based on the sound. So this also does give us some insight into how we might address this in the future, but I thought it was an interesting piece to share and really appreciate this comment, so thank you.
Non-binary and queer and almost certainly on the autism spectrum, and these things are not a coincidence. A whole bunch of studies came out a couple years ago about how there's a huge overlap between the autistic and gender diverse / queer communities. Why, you may ask? Well, there's a lot of hypotheses about this, but I think it comes down to the fact that we just think differently. Many autistic people don't instinctively understand social norms. We learn through mimicry and through trial and error. Personally, I just think that makes us more open to exploring alternate identities. Two of my biggest childhood hyperfixations were Sailor Moon and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, both of which have a huge queer component. Pretty much right away, I knew I identified with it. Zero part of me struggled with it, and yes, part of that is because my parents had both left the church and I didn't grow up in a homophobic environment, but I saw it and thought, oh yeah, same. I know things are a lot different now, and that's great, but people did not come out at age 11 in the 90s. But I did, and that caused me a huge amount of social problems, which again, I didn't understand. The only reason I struggle with my non-binary identity now is because it doesn't look typical.
Growing up autistic but not knowing that you're autistic is so inherently traumatic because you think that you're just a neurotypical person unable to navigate neurotypical life. I mean, you don't even have that language, you just feel like you stick out, that you're just not like other people. And people have asked me, why did you celebrate getting an autism diagnosis? What else am I going to do? Am I going to sulk? That's my answer, that's my validation. That's my proof, that's my reason for, no, I'm not just a neurotypical person who can't navigate neurotypical life. My brain is different, and that's why. Since getting my diagnosis, when I've been having low points or I've been struggling, it has felt different. It feels like I'm valid, it feels like I'm allowed. Whereas before I knew that I was autistic, it's kind of like, oh, you must just be doing something really wrong.
This one goes out to anyone who ever made fun of me for being weird, quirky, quiet, etc. It's okay. I didn't know that you were being ableist either.
It's like injustice grates on autistics like the itchy tag on their clothing.
That is the perfect analogy. Go back, watch that whole stitch. Because she's talking about the difference between autistics and allistics and the inability that the autistic brain has to put something in the back of their mind, to get used to something in their nervous system so it's not affecting them. Because yeah, you can be bothered by that tag on the back of your shirt. It can be frustrating and irritating, but do you have that ability to forget about it, to get used to it? An autistic brain does not. We're going to set our clothes on fire, or we're going to have a meltdown. And the same comes with how we deal with social injustice. We're enraged by it all the time. It's always there. Everything's connected to it. It doesn't ever go away. And I think that that also applies to not just societal injustice, but personal injustice. The trauma that's been done to us. I think that grates on us like an itchy tag as well, which is why we struggle in our healing journey.
It doesn't even feel like you're trying. I just need you to be supportive. I'm sorry, I'm really trying. I just need you to tell me what that looks like for you. So on top of dealing with the death of a friend, you want me to tell you how to support me. I understand that probably feels like an extra burden right now, and that's the last thing that I want to do to you, but support for me clearly looks different than for you, and I'm not hitting the mark. So do you want some space to self-regulate? No. If I tell you what to do, it's not genuine. What's the point? Why can't it be genuine? Just because it's not how I naturally communicate empathy doesn't mean that my desire is any less. I thought the reason you were talking about your regrets was because you were trying to work through them and see how they were illogical, but that's something that I would want and not you. My desire is still there, it's just that I need to learn the skills. I can't deal with this on top of Mark's accident. I'm sorry, maybe we should have had these conversations before, but we didn't, and it breaks my heart that you're going through this, and I know that there's nothing I can do to make it completely better, but if there's something I can do to make it a little bit better or make sure that you don't feel alone, I want to do that. So I will keep trying to be supportive, but my understanding of support is through my brain, and I'm just worried that I'm just gonna keep making it worse. But do you want some earplugs? Why would I want earplugs? I just want you to be supportive.
Did you know that there are autistic bees? Yes, there are bees that scientists describe as antisocial. Okay, stereotyping the bees now, Frank. Who share a genetic profile with autistic people. The scientists also seemed shocked that these bees were looked after and accepted by the hive despite their unusual behavior. Maybe take a leaf out of the bees book, Frank.
Nobody would pretend to have a disability for attention.
Okay, so for anybody who has an issue with self-diagnosis, I would like to draw your attention to this document. Exhibit A would be this in the corner. That is the University of Washington Autism Center. The University of Washington is one of the best schools for just about anything in the country. Needless to say, they're a reputable source. And in particular, check out this middle paragraph here that says, in our experience at the University of Washington Autism Center, many professionals are not informed about the variety of ways that autism can appear and often doubt an autistic person's accurate self-diagnosis. And this is the highlighted part. In contrast, inaccurate self-diagnosis of autism appears to be uncommon. We believe that if you have carefully researched the topic and strongly resonate with the experience of the autistic community, you are probably autistic.